is making sure everything's rosy in the garden.
It's the last Gardener's World of the series, and Carol, Alice and I have some great ideas to bulk up the borders next year without breaking the bank. We celebrate the autumn glory of Stourhead and the biggest, smelliest flowering of the year. Most of the garden's going to ground, but not the roses on the pergola. They're only planted back in the summer, but they've done extremely well. And because they're young plants, I'm going to leave them unpruned. You see, I want the height. I want the stems to clothe the woodwork. But that said, I do have roses elsewhere that could use a little attention from the secateurs. Meet Gertrude Jekyll, a shrub rose planted in a small 5 by 5 metre front garden. Now, because she's in a small garden, she needs a bit of pruning, particularly at this time of year, because you see the stems, they're quite thorny, and they'll blow around in the breeze and cross the paths. Now, traditionally, the time to prune roses is when they've lost their leaves, when they're fully dormant. But this beautiful plant won't take any harm if I just trim it back now. Like all shrub roses, the name of the game is just to shorten the briars, shorten the stems. By trimming the plant back, I'll encourage new buds to break from low down. So instead of having a leggy rose with flowers just on the top, I'll have beautiful scented blooms right through the summer, from the base right the way up the side of this woodwork. Now over here on this fence, I've got another shrub rose, Strawberry Hill, and I'm training it to this metalwork like a climber. Something you can do with shrub roses, it's perfectly fine. The way to prune them in winter is to identify their main briars, the framework of stems, tie them into your supports, and then trim back the flowered side shoots. You can always tell them. You can see the stubs of the flowers there, but also they have short thorns and are quite sappy. Trim them back so the side shoots are about 15 centimetres long and cut just above a bud. If you're training a rose over an arch, then I think it's best to keep the plant on the outside. It gives a much better shape and stops the thorns from scratching your head. Roses inspire a passion like no other flower in gardeners. Jane Barton grows 45 different varieties. And if you're thinking of planting roses this winter, a garden might just give you the inspiration you need.
We moved here in 1992, so we've been in this particular garden 18 years. We wanted a garden that reflected and related to the house. And of course, old shrub roses are a quintessential element of cottage gardens. Colour in the garden is very important to me, and I particularly like the colours I've used in this area. The dark rose Chianti against the purple-leaved hazel go very well together. And then the rose Chianti picks up a striped rose called Ferdinand Pichard. The underplanting here too, I feel very happy with. There are plants that complement the roses in colour, and there are also plants that contrast with it, because the underplanting, they are the chorus to the main event, the roses. During the flowering period, the main thing to do is deadhead. I like deadheading, and I usually do it every evening. So if I see any blossom that looks faded, I will take that off, and then the rest of the shrub rose looks much better for the rest of the flowering season. Once the flowers have finished flowering totally, I usually prune them. I treat shrub roses as summer flowering shrubs. I don't prune at the traditional times during the winter. I feel this is a very personal garden. I grow plants that I like. It's wonderful when people visit the garden when we're open, and they like it too. It's wonderful to be given that kind of compliment. But I grow for me.
Ivy Cottage will be open on selected dates next year as part of the National Garden Scheme. You can find details on our website. Now, if that's inspired you to plant some roses in your own garden, now's the perfect time, because they're available like this as bare root plants. Now, I used to work on a rose nursery, and that was the only way they used to be sold. Customers would come along when they were in flower, pick out the blooms they liked. I'd dig up the plants and they'd come back and collect them during the winter, dug up from the ground without any soil on their roots. And there still are advantages to buying bare root plants. For starters, they're about half the price of container-grown roses, and you get a much wider choice of varieties. And when it comes to rose varieties, there are thousands to choose from. But I particularly like the species roses. Now, these are the parents of all cultivated roses in our gardens. And because of that, they're robust, they're tough, and they can cope with tricky situations like the thin soil atop this bank. This one is particularly good. It's called moschata, the musk rose. Flowers in late summer. You get a flush of flowers right through September into autumn, and then you get hips. But whatever variety of bare root rose you choose, a nice big hole is the starting point, with a little compost, some blood, fish and bone in the bottom, and a sprinkling of mycorrhizal fungi on the roots. The reason you need a big hole is that you must never bend the roots when you put your rose in the ground. And this part here, the scion, the join where the shoots meet the roots, must be buried below the soil level by about a hand's width. That encourages the shoots to root, and in the long run makes for a much stronger plant. I'm just angling the stems towards the support, in this case a fence. With all bare root plants, another trick is just give the stems a gentle jiggle. Just causes the soil to fall down amongst the roots so there's no air spaces. And then firm in. It's well worth taking your time when planting a rose because it can be in your garden for a lifetime. But for some gardeners, a lifetime isn't enough to see their work come to fruition. Alan Powers is curator of one of the most iconic 18th century landscape gardens in the country, Stourhead in Wiltshire. And he explained to us what it's like meeting the responsibilities of the past and the challenges of the future. There is a magic about Stourhead at this time of year. It's the moment just before winter when the trees are the stars, outshining the landscape and eclipsing the architecture. It's this moment that head gardener Alan Power treasures the most.
This is the time of the year I get excited for me, and I get excited for the trees, I get excited for the visitors, because all of a sudden the trees stand forward of the temples, the trees start showing off, they really stand proud, and it really gets me out of bed in the morning. I'm happy to wake up, I'm excited about coming into work.
The lake extends the tree's splendour in its reflection, so on a fine autumn day you get double the hit of leaf colour. Stourhead is a perfect example of an 18th century landscape garden. Every tree has been placed, every building constructed to create an idealised view of nature. And whilst the garden would have been appreciated in its youth, it was actually planted for the enjoyment of future generations. It's us that see this garden in its prime.
Although Stourhead screams the 18th century landscape movement, it screams art, it screams pictures. This picture at Stourhead is very much a living work of art. It's forever changing, it's not set in time, and it's not a museum piece. And the one thing that really does keep it alive is the tree collection.
The trees are a living timeline. These sweet chestnuts have been here for 700 years. Later introductions are the legacy of plant hunters who risked their lives to bring them back from all corners of the globe. Without their spirit of adventure, the English landscape we know today would look very different. And one of these additions is looking superb right now.